Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to completely flip how you look at movie backgrounds. We usually look right past the rooms, the cities, and the landscapes behind our favorite actors. We just kind of treat them as window dressing. But I promise you, by the end of our time together today, you'll see how a film's setting is actually a carefully engineered, invisible character that shapes literally everything unfolding on screen. Before we get into the nuts and bolts of how this all works, I want you to ask yourself something. Have you ever felt that a movie's environment was, silently speaking to you? Because it absolutely is. Think about it. If you see a pristine, white picket fence cottage with red roses, you immediately feel this sense of optimism. But if you see a crumbling mansion with these vacant, eye-like windows, boom, impending doom. That is no accident. The environment is feeding you vital information long before a single line of dialogue is even spoken. Let's kick things off by thinking about the sheer spectacle of Baz Luhrmann's Moulin Rouge. Picture Nicole Kidman swinging high above the audience in that breathtaking Oscar-winning set that perfectly captures the massive scale of movie magic required to make us feel completely transported. It takes an incredible amount of skill to make an audience feel totally at home in a stylized Parisian nightclub, or, for that matter, a million light-years away in another galaxy. Modern production designers have this monumental task of bringing these distinct, atmospheric worlds to life. And all of that spectacle perfectly illustrates the golden rule of production design. As designer Paul Silbert points out, you can't just slap a cool style onto a film. It doesn't work that way. The style has to grow organically from a vision that comes directly from the script itself. Design isn't about the production designer just showing off their personal style. It's this highly expressive use of objects, forms, and colors strictly in the service of the story. The whole shebang has to cohere perfectly. So, here is our roadmap for this explainer. We'll start with number 1, the magic of production design. Then 2, what happens when setting actually becomes a character. 3, creating mood and meaning. 4, studio magic versus real locations. And finally 5, building entire worlds and futures. All right, section 1, the magic of production design, the blueprint of visual texture. You can think of the production designer as the absolute maestro of a film's visual texture. Their job kicks off with making these incredibly elaborate, detailed sketches and plans for the sets. And from there, they supervise the construction, the painting, and the decoration down to the absolute last detail. But they're not operating in a vacuum. They collaborate so deeply with the director, the cinematographer, and the costumer to make sure the visual effect is totally unified. Actually, in modern films, this collaboration is so tight that production designers sometimes even dictate camera angles. Like in the 1989 Batman movie, Anton Furst's sets of Gotham City literally dictated the overhead and low-angle shots just to enhance that crazy, imposing vertical space. Moving on to section 2, when setting becomes character, the 4 pillars of the environment. So here's the crucial thing you've got to keep in mind whenever you watch a film. You have to analyze these 4 key factors of setting because every single one of them directly impacts the conflicts and actions of the characters. First, you've got the temporal factors, meaning the specific time period in history. Second are the geographic factors, things like terrain and climate. Third, the social structures and economic factors surrounding the characters. And fourth, the customs, moral attitudes, and codes of behavior that society pushes on them. These are not just background details, folks. They're integral forces shaping human behavior. Because of those 4 factors, the environment basically takes on one of 2 massive roles in the storytelling. First, it can act as a naturalistic determiner. This means the environment is this dominant, controlling force that actually shapes a character's destiny. Think of a protagonist desperately trying to escape the cruel, indifferent trap of a specific small town or era. On the flip side, setting can act as a reflection. This is when the environment gives us visual clues to a character's inner state. It's like Edgar Allan Poe's decaying House of Usher metaphorically mirroring the crumbling mind of the person living inside. To really put this into perspective, think about Mrs. Venable, played brilliantly by Katharine Hepburn and Suddenly Last Summer. The script demands a garden that feels like a prehistoric, tropical jungle just full of carnivorous plants and harsh, thrashing sounds. That violent, steaming jungle garden perfectly reflects her vicious, survival-of-the-fittest worldview. The setting is literally showing us exactly who she is on the inside. Which brings us to section 3, creating mood and meaning. Designing the emotional atmosphere. You know exactly what I mean if you think about the strange, haunted quality of the Bates home in Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. That stark house, silhouetted against the sky, sitting on a hill right behind a drab, run-down motel. Wow. Its foreboding architecture doesn't just dictate a terrifying mood, which is so crucial for suspending our disbelief in a horror film, but it acts as both a reflection and a determiner of Norman Bates's own fractured character. The house is this heavy emotional weight pressing down on the entire story. Now, when creating mood and meaning, designers also have this really brilliant trick where they create what's called a microcosm. Translated, that means the world in little. This is when a setting purposefully isolates the characters from all external influences, like stranding them on a desert island, trapping them in an airplane, or, as screenwriter Patty Chayefsky did, putting them in a hospital. This self-contained little world ends up representing the human condition at large. It gives the film's theme this universal, allegorical scale, forcing us to watch the struggles of society play out in a tightly controlled, isolated bubble. All right, Section 4, Studio Magic versus Real Locations, the battle for environmental control. So directors generally love shooting at a studio. Why? Because you get total environmental control. You can completely manipulate the lighting, and you don't have to fight the moving sun, noisy traffic, or angry city residents. But when a script demands a truly heightened sense of reality, designers have to go out on location. And let me tell you, that requires bending nature to their will. Get this. For the 1984 film The River, the production designer literally leveled 60 acres of forest, built a dam, raised a river by 4 feet, and because shooting dragged into November, they actually had to spray bright autumn leaves with green paint to make it look like summer. That is the astonishing lengths they'll go to for a setting that feels authentic. But sometimes you have to blend the two, and that's the magic of what we call composite settings. Think about that iconic moment in Raiders of the Lost Ark. Harrison Ford is running for his life from this massive rolling boulder inside a highly controlled interior cave set, filmed in England. But just a few seconds later, he bursts out of the cave into the sunlit outdoors, which was actually filmed in Hawaii. Production design stitches those thousands of miles together so seamlessly that you, the viewer, never for a second doubt it's the exact same location. Finally, we arrive at Section 5, Building Worlds and Futures, the logic of personal and fantasy spaces. When it comes to building a deeply personalized living space from scratch, legendary production designer Robert Boyle follows a very specific step-by-step logic to support the actor's performance. First, he asks, what is their economic situation? Like, what can they actually afford? Because economics form the macro basis of our lives. Second, what's their educational background? Do they go to an Ivy League college or drop out of high school? And third, he zeroes in on the micro. What is their entire range of intensely personal, social, and sexual choices? A designer absolutely has to know all of these details before they even pick up a pencil to start drawing the character's room. And it's just mind-blowing when you see that logic scaled up to an entire fantasy world. Take Blade Runner, for example. Production designer Lawrence G. Paul had to build a complete futurescape for the year 2020. He pulled this off using a technique called additive architecture, literally building protrusions and layers onto existing structures on a studio backlot. He packed every single square inch of the screen with visual information to create multiple layers of texture. The result? An environment so dense and so immersive that viewers are completely convinced they've been transported to a time and place that literally no one has ever experienced in reality. As we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with a thought that's going to totally change how you watch movies from now on. The next time you sit down with your favorite film, I want you to force your eyes away from the actors for just a second. Really look at the walls, the weather, the architecture. Ask yourself, how is that invisible character in the background secretly dictating the mood, revealing the inner thoughts, and controlling the ultimate destiny of the people in the foreground? Because once you start seeing the true power of production design, a whole new layer of storytelling just unlocks right before your eyes. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive.